So we're going to talk a little bit about just a best practice, which the question is, how do I know my unit is operating properly? Very simple way to do that is basically go to your controller before you do, when you have everything set up, and basically set your controller for each tower down to 1 minute a time. And then what this does is you run the program. It allows you to check and make sure the valves are each valve, a set of valves is opening correctly, and each number of towers is opening correctly. So you can. It's usually two-person job. You have somebody that watches the controller, and then you have another person that goes to each tower, checks the valves, makes sure that they're operating correctly. And then once you establish that everything is good, then you can go back in and program your towers to the correct number of hours that you want them to run. So that's a basic way, just a simple way of testing it, making sure everything's working correctly. As far as replacement parts, Lakos does offer replacement parts for this unit. It's basically 3 sets of parts basically we offer. Number one, the control panel itself. We can provide you with a new control panel if you have any issues with your other one. We do not separate out parts or anything like that. Everything is provided. It's just the control panel itself, complete. The second set of parts we can provide is your valves and actuators. So we can supply, of course, a complete assembly valve and actuator if you have issues. If you have an issue with the valve itself, we can supply a replacement valve. Or if you have a problem with the actuator, we can supply just the actuator itself. So basically three sets of parts available for this kit. So now we're going to go over some simple troubleshooting tips for the multi-tower switching kit. There's a few things you need to be aware of when you're running this kit and wiring it and programming it. Those are generally the areas when we do see some issues or we do have problems. Somebody may call into the factory. I encourage you to please review your multi-tower switching kit IOM before you go out to the field to familiarize yourself with the controller itself, the settings, the wiring, so that when you're out there you can check all these things. First thing to always check, of course, is the programming. You want to make sure that your programming is set correctly. If you have a question on your programming, on if everything is working, simple test to do is take the timer, set your timer on the number of towers you have, set it down to the minimum number of minutes, which is 1 minute, and just let the unit cycle through and have somebody watch and check the valves, make sure that they're opening and closing correctly and following whatever the display shows. Very simple. Again, just make sure your settings are correct. Remember, it's in minutes, it's not in hours, so you have to take how many hours you want it to run and convert that into minutes and make sure that's set. Make sure that none of your towers are turned off that you don't want turned off. You want everything operating as what the controller, and again, the display will show you that, give you that information. Secondly, again, wiring is another issue that sometimes we have problems with. So again, you want to make sure that your wiring to and from the valves to the controller is correct. Again, INO manual has the general schematic for the wiring and also some very good pictures that show the 4-tower wiring with all the wires and show how to wire that in. So it's a good reference point to use that. Again, you want to make sure that the wires are landed good. You want to make sure if you're having any issues that any wires here in the controller itself, you would just kind of want to check that when you get it when it's installed, make sure that everything is in good and there's no loose wires in the controller itself. The other thing you want to do, we talked a little bit about, is this breaker right here. This is what converts and sends the 24-volt power, basically converts it to the 120 to send the voltage to the valves. So you want to make sure that this breaker is turned on so that you get power to your valves. Some cases, this will, if you don't have this turned on, the display will still operate, it will still show function, but your valves will not function. So you want to make sure that this is turned on and that your valves are operating. The simplest way to do that is, again, the actuator has a indicator on it. You want to make sure it rotates in and out, open and closed. You want to make sure that the valve, if tower 2 is supposed to be open, you want to make sure that the valve is rotated to that open position. One of the other things to be aware of with the actuators is it does have an emergency knob here, manually close if you had to close something. Just be aware, there's a note here that you cannot do this without shutting off the power. You need to make sure that the power is shut off before you manually close the valve. If you don't do that, there's potential that the circuit board and the actuator could be damaged. So just keep that in mind when you're doing it. If you have any issues, something that comes up that you just can't seem to figure out, please feel free to give us a call at the factory and ask for any of the application engineers or our electrical engineer, and we'll be able to help you with those, try to get that troubleshooted and figured out.